Welcome everyone to week 3 of my Sculpt January 2021 time-lapse videos. So this is week 3 of Sculpt January. If you haven't watched week 2 and week 1, I'll leave links in the description and you can check those out if you'd like to watch those. So if you haven't heard about Sculpt January is a really fun art challenge, and it was created by Zach from CG Boost. And so how the challenge works is every January, the creators of the challenge make a calendar for the entire month of January, and for each day they have a prompt or a word, and the prompt or a word is a suggestion for what you want to sculpt. So you can kind of get an idea for what you'd like to sculpt. And you can sculpt with Blender, ZBrush, really any 3D software, it doesn't really matter. You could even sculpt with traditional clay if you do that. I've sculpted a little bit with traditional clay and it is pretty fun. And so by the end of January, you've gotten in a lot of practice and hopefully you've improved your sculpting skills. So I really look forward to this every year. This is my 4th year of doing Sculpt January, and I do really feel like it helps me to improve my sculpting skills because I just get in a large volume of practice. So I really think it helps to improve your sculpting skills. So this is week 3, so we are on day 18. So for day 18, the prompt was ouch with an exclamation point. So I decided to sculpt a character with an ouch expression because I really like sculpting characters and especially faces, because sculpting realistic faces is what I really want to get good at. So I try to sculpt faces whenever I can. So I just decided to sculpt this character with an ouch expression. And so you can see right there, just adding in some final details there, adding in some kind of skin details, and then also adding in a basic tongue. And then what I did here for the hair is I added in a separate object and used that to sculpt the hair. I just find that it works a little bit better if you use a separate object for the hair. So there we go, day 18, ouch. And on to day 19. So the prompt for day 19 was extraordinary vegetable. So I decided to sculpt a carrot. So I just did some basic box modeling, just modeling a base mesh for the carrot. And then I started to sculpt those little crevices and creases in the carrot. So I used the draw brush and the crease brush to make those little creases in there. And then right here you can see I'm making like the green stem kind of part of the carrot that kind of comes up to the surface, and then adding some thickness to that. But after I finished creating the carrot, I felt like it was kind of too simple and too easy, and I made it pretty quickly. So I decided to sculpt a rabbit head, and that way the day would just be a bit more challenging, and I'd get a bit more sculpting practice into the day. So I decided to sculpt a rabbit head, like looking at the carrot. So just added a sphere and then just pulled out the nose and the front of the face, pulling up those ears there, just making all of the rabbit, the different parts of the rabbit. And then I added in those 2 holes there for the eye socket, and then also like adding in the mouth and the nose. And then adding in those little dots there for where the whiskers would come out of the rabbit. And then you can see just adding in a sphere and making some basic eyes, and then just modeling some basic whiskers, sticking them in the character, and then duplicating them to make all the whiskers on the rabbit. So there we go, day 19, extraordinary vegetable. And day 20, so the prompt for day 20 was large amphibian. So I decided to sculpt a giant frog. So I actually used the meta balls to make the basic shape of the frog, and just made the basic shape of the frog. And you can't use the mirror modifier on the frog, so what I did is I converted it to a mesh, converted the meta balls to a mesh, and then I used the knife tool. So in edit mode, if you press K, that'll go to the knife tool. Then if you press Z, it's going to turn on and off the cut through. So that way it's going to cut through the entire mesh, almost like if you were in like a wireframe view, it'll cut through the entire mesh all the way through. And then what C does is it turns on the angle constraint. So that way you can constrain your cut just from the top down, and then I just cut all the way through the frog and just cut through it, and that way the half of the frog was completely cut through. And then I added the mirror modifier and just mirrored that over. And that's how I can use the meta balls to make a mirrored character that I can start to sculpt with. So then here I am just sculpting the basic shapes of the frog. I started with the eye, adding in those eyelids, and also just adding in the pupil for the eye. Looking at references, of course, I always look at references, so I grabbed some frog references to help me with my sculpting. Just sculpting in all the shapes of the frog. You can see here I'm adding in the mouth of the frog and the nostrils and the nose of the frog as well. And then right here I also added a little grinning mouth. I thought that was pretty fun at the end there. And adding in the spine. And then right here I actually added in my house 3D model from my Complete Blender beginner tutorial series. So I added in the house model and stuck that right next to the frog to make the frog look really big. Like the frog is as large as like 2 houses. And then right here I just modeled a basic character, just like some guy walking out of his house, and he looks up and he's seeing this giant frog sitting next to his house. And then I added a super surprised expression, because, you know, you'd be pretty surprised if you walked out of your house and you see a giant frog as big as 2 houses. I didn't want to go into too much detail because he is pretty small, and I'd already spent a lot of time modeling and sculpting the frog. And then here I am just making some basic legs, mirroring that over, and then sticking the legs down right there into the character. And then adding in some surprised eyebrows, kind of, you know, cartoony eyebrows that are hovering over his eyes. And then just sculpted some basic hair on the character. So there we go, day 20, large amphibian. And day 21, so the prompt for day 21 was killer furniture. So I decided to start by just modeling a basic couch. So just box modeling it using the mirror modifier so I don't have to model both sides. And just box modeling a basic couch. And then right here you can see I added in some eyes and just stuck them on the couch to make the couch look like it's alive. And then I added in some eyebrows to give it a mean expression, so he kind of looks like an angry couch. And then I went into edit mode and pulled up the cushions to make it look like an opening mouth. Then I created this basic character, and he kind of actually looks like the character from the other one, from day 20, large amphibian. Maybe he is the same guy. But yeah, just modeled a basic character, and I just gave him a very shocked and afraid expression because I'm making the couch look like it's trying to eat him. Maybe it is the same guy from the other one, so, you know. So he walks outside and he sees a giant frog larger than his house, and then he walks inside and his couch tries to eat him. And then just modeling a basic body, making those arms like coming way out, and then modeling just some basic hands and sticking them in the couch as if the couch cushions are the couch's mouth and then the couch is trying to eat him. And then just modeling some little lumps for the couch. And then I also modeled a coaster with a cup. Maybe he was drinking something. And then also modeled a TV remote. Maybe he was, you know, drinking something, and then maybe he was having a drink and then also watching TV. So I just modeled some basic buttons there on the TV remote, duplicated those buttons over to make all of the buttons. And there we go, day 21, killer furniture. And day 22, so the word for day 22, or the prompt for day 22, was morning face. So I really like sculpting faces because that's what I want to get good at, but I haven't sculpted a female face in a while. I find sculpting female faces pretty difficult. I definitely find them harder than sculpting male faces, but I wanted to get in some more practice sculpting female faces, so I decided to sculpt a female face for this one. I don't know about you guys, but at least for me, I find it a lot harder to sculpt female faces. One reason is because I probably don't practice it very much. But also I think that it's harder to sculpt female faces because the forms and the shapes of the face are more subtle. So you kind of have to get them really close to make it look good. And then sculpting the neck, just pulling out a neck, thickening it up, adding the different neck muscles. Of course, I looked at lots of reference images. I looked at some like female facial anatomy references to kind of see how the skull was shaped and, like, you know, the different fat pads and muscles. And then adding in some spheres and just modeling some basic eyes, and then sculpting the eyelids. Right now the eyelids are really puffy. You can see they're pretty round and puffy, but I worked on that and kind of smoothed it out and sharpened up the eyelids a bit. And then I just decided to sculpt the eyebrows into the character's face. And then I sculpted in those saggy parts below the eyes to kind of look like a mourning face. And then I added in a new object and started to sculpt the hair. So once I sculpted the basic shape of the hair, I actually turned the symmetry off, and that way it wouldn't be mirrored on both sides. So when I'm sculpting the face, I'd want it to be mirrored on both sides. But after I sculpt the basic shape of the hair, I turn that off, and that way I can make the hair different on either side, because I think that really helps. If you sculpt the hair with the symmetry on and it's exactly the same on both sides, something looks off, because hair doesn't really act like that most of the time. So yeah, just sculpting in all the detail. I tried to sculpt in a lot of detail. Overall, I wasn't too happy with this one. I definitely need to improve my skills with sculpting female faces. I think one thing that I could have done better is made the jaw a bit smoother, because I feel like the jaw is a bit sharp. So yeah, just using the draw brush and the crease brush and adding in all that detail there in the hair. I usually just sculpt the hair because I'm really bad at using particle systems for the hair. I just find it pretty difficult. Definitely something that I need to improve on. So yeah, just sculpting the hair, adding in lots of detail. And of course I made it different on both sides so that it looks a lot better. So there we go, day 22, morning face. Alright, on to day 23. So the prompt for day 23 was magic helmet. So I wanted to sculpt another face because I want to get really good at sculpting faces. So I sculpted another face. So I don't really know why the helmet is magical, but what I decided to do is to sculpt kind of a soldier face. So I tried to make some pretty sharp angles on the soldier face to kind of make him look bold and powerful and strong. Especially on the jaw, I tried to make the jaw look kind of sharp. And that way he kind of looked more like a soldier. And then I grabbed some reference images of the Rohan helmets from Lord of the Rings. And I used the design of the Rohan helmets as a reference to get an idea for the design of the helmet that I wanted to make. I really like the look of the Rohan helmets from Lord of the Rings. If you know about Lord of the Rings, then Eomer and King Theoden are from Rohan. So I really like the design of those helmets, so I use those as a reference. So just giving him kind of a serious expression, making that brow come down like that to make him look like he's maybe marching into a battle or something. And then I just decided to box model the helmet because for something like this, I just find it way easier to box model. When I'm doing like hard surface stuff, I find it just way easier to box model, so I don't really find any point in sculpting the helmet. It's a lot easier to box model and it will turn out a lot better. So I just box modeled a basic helmet, again, using like some reference and inspiration from the Rohan helmets. Just adding in those different details around the helmet. Also modeling those pieces of metal coming down on the sides of the face, kind of like a cheek guard for the soldier. And then just pulling out the neck and making the neck muscles for the soldier. And then right at the end here, I turned off the symmetry and just used the grab brush and pulled the character around a little bit to make his expression look a little bit different, and also kind of made one shoulder higher than the other just to make him look a little bit different on each side. Makes the sculpt look a little bit better. So there we go, day 23, magic helmet. Alright, and day 24, the last sculpt for this week, the prompt was decorative bones. So I immediately thought of some dinosaur bones that would be like in a museum. So I decided to make something like that, something that would look like maybe it was in a museum. So I got some reference images of some dinosaur bones, kind of like something you might see in a museum, and then just box modeled the base mesh and then started to sculpt the dinosaur bones. So later on in the time lapse you'll see this, but what I did is I just sculpted one piece of the spine and then arrayed that over so that it would make the entire spine. So just adding in little bits of details, adding in some little cracks there and some holes where like the eyes and the nose and the nostril and everything would be. I looked at reference images and there actually were lumps and holes like that in the skull. And then here I am just adding lots of little bits of details, little chunks and cracks and things to kind of make it look really old. You know, maybe when they were digging it up, you know, it had gotten really scratched and stuff from maybe the dirt that was over the bones or something like that. And then what I did right here is I added a cube, and then I used that cube as the object for the array modifier. So if you add the array modifier, you can actually choose it to be arrayed by that object. And then if you like move that object, rotate it or scale it, it's going to actually rotate around with the cube. So you can see how I'm just changing around that cube. I can like rotate it, scale it, do whatever. And it's really cool, and it makes it look like the spine is kind of rotating. And that way I don't have to manually place all the pieces of the spine, it's just arrayed over. So after I did that, I just went into sculpt mode and just sculpted one piece of the spine, so just one spine bone. And then right here at the end, I added the displacement modifier, and I displaced it with a noise texture, and then just made the strength really, really small. And that way it just adds a little bit of detail over all of the bones, and it just makes the bones look even older, kind of scratched up and worn. So I just added that for all of the objects, and it just gives a really nice look. And then the last thing I did is added some teeth, because you got to add teeth to make it look very fierce and dangerous. I basically just modeled one tooth, duplicated it over, and then added the mirror modifier. And I also changed up a lot of the teeth to just make the shape a little bit different so they don't look exactly the same. And then at the very end, just adding that displacement modifier again to make it a little bit lumpy. So there we go, day 24, Decorative Bones. So that's going to do it for week 3 of my Sculpt January 2021 time-lapse videos. Again, I'll leave a link in the video description to my Sketchfab profile if you'd like to check out my sculpts on Sketchfab. And also, if you're participating in Sculpt January, you can definitely leave me a link in the comments to your sculpts, and I'd love to check them out. So thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in week 4, the last week of Sculpt January 2021.